When did you walk out of a movie theater and why? I worked at a theater in the late 80s and we had Mystic Pizza. We didn't sell very many tickets to it, and then about 20 minutes in, most everyone would come out demanding their money back. The manager would wait at the door with passes filled out waiting for them. Never could figure out why everyone was so mad about that movie. What's so horrible about it? I've never really heard of it before, but it has a 6.2 on IMDb and a 78% on Rotten Tomatoes. It doesn't look like my cup of tea at all, but it also doesn't look like the kind of thing people would walk out of in droves. I've never seen it, but I believe Mystic Pizza is a pizzeria in Mystic, Connecticut. If people didn't know this, they might be expecting a movie about magical pizza, which sounds awesome. Dinosaur. I was screaming and crying because I was scared of the dinosaurs. My dad dragged me out of the theater. My dad brought me and my brothers to see Jurassic Park in the theaters at 9 p.m. After the T-Rex ate the lawyer, I spent the rest of the movie in the hall crying and terrified. I had nightmares for weeks. My dad and brothers watched the rest of the movie and didn't even check on me. Little girl sobbing in the hallway of a movie theater. Yep, good times. My dad, my 11-year-old sister, and my 21-year-old self thought it would be nice to take my grandma out to dinner and a movie for her birthday. There was a light-hearted comedy in theaters at the time about a grandson who fell on hard times and had to move in with his grandmother, and hijinks ensue. We took my super conservative 87-year-old Christian grandmother to see Grandma's Boy. I think we made it to the point where Alex tickles his pickle in the bathroom before Grandma loudly proclaimed everyone in the theater was going to hell and we had to leave. Still one of my favorite movies to this day. Always think about her when I watch it. I had a guy in high school take me to this on our first date, with his mother sitting right next to us. We got through the whole movie, uncomfortable as heck, and afterwards his mother was so angry. She ended up telling him that I was no good for him if I was able to sit through that filth. I was offended by that, so I took his virginity and dated him for a year. The narrator has now Googled this film, and he's not sure what's funnier. The fact that a solidly not good film is one of someone's favorites, or the fact that someone else lost their virginity to said same complete B-comedy film for green herb users. It's funny as heck, to be honest. It wasn't my choice, but when I was a kid, I went to watch Austin Powers' The Spy Who Shagged Me with my mum and my friend. My mum was already pretty disgusted with the movie during the first 20 minutes. The tipping point for her was when Fat Man was lying in bed with Heather Graham and she puts that little tracker thing up his butt. My mum got furious and said we weren't watching any more of it and we walked into Star Wars Episode 1 instead. Go figure. And I'll clarify, my mum doesn't speak English well, she's from Mexico, so she didn't know anything about the movie and doesn't know what shag means to this day. My parents walked me out of Jumanji as a kid because I couldn't emotionally handle Robin Williams getting hurt. I walked out of Captain America: The Winter Soldier. No, not because it's a bad movie, but because the popcorn machine exploded and the theater caught on fire. Fun times! I had to leave during Titanic. My friend that I was there with began crying hysterically once the ship began sinking and declared she couldn't watch the rest. I was kind of annoyed since it's not like it was a surprise that the ship was going to sink. I only left with her because she was simply inconsolable and making a scene at that point. I saw that movie with my mom, who's from Mexico City. And surprisingly, this was a point of history that she had missed out on. The second I heard, "Hey, Stephen, the boat is sinking, and there are not enough lifeboats," was when I knew this was going to be a pretty rough cinematic experience for my mom. I watched it with my mom as well, and she's from Peru, and when the boat started sinking and the people started to drop, she started laughing hysterically. Everyone was gasping or silent, and here's this Latin lady laughing at the death of all these people because she thought it was funny how they dropped off and plopped into the water. Satya, these people are falling down. Watching that thing sink is the reason I did like that movie. The love story's generic as heck, and the old lady just sucks. But I could watch that boat sink all day. Plus, the propeller dude. Bless James Cameron for the propeller dude. Boom. I knew a guy who'd made 2 combat landings with the Marines in World War II, Saipan and Okinawa, and he had to walk out of Saving Private Ryan at the Omaha Beach scene. Oh man, here's my time to shine. So my wife and I have very different taste in movies. For example, she likes every single Hallmark Christmas movie, despite each one having the same fricking plot. Single but empowered woman stumbles into a new situation during Christmas, meets guy who is not her type but rocks her worldview. Christmas magic, fall in love. So we rarely see movies together because of this. Fury Road? Saw it by myself. The only good movie we've recently seen together was Inside Out because we both love Disney and Pixar films. Anyways, back in 2014 we decided to go on a double date with some friends of ours. I tell her she can pick the movie for once because I picked the restaurant, because we also differ on food tastes. She picks Endless Love. From the start, this movie is a train wreck. It's literally the most cliched piece of garbage some movie exec could think up. It's like they dumped every romance trope into a brainstorming meeting and the execs had a field day. Yeah, we'll cast this hot guy and this hot girl. The kids will like that. Hot people sell. Can they act? Who gives a crap? I mean, this thing just spirals out of frickin' control by Act 2. I can't remember all the details, but there's a terminal illness subplot that never gets resolved, and the main girl's brother… oh my. Here's something I do remember. The girl says, "I have no friends for my high school grad party because I'm too rich and goody-goody." The guy says, "So, good girl. I'm brooding, but I'll call the police on another party to get those people over to your party." The party starts, and the weird brother from college says, "I've got a cool college game to play. Let's draw songs out of a hat and you pick a partner and go off for a little bit and then come back and sing a duet of the song." I mean, who the frick has ever heard of that game? How is this a remotely fun party game? Anyway, the movie is bad. People are laughing at parts that aren't meant to be funny because it's so over-the-top drama acting. Near the end, my wife whispers to me, "I'm so sorry." Then it happens. One guy stands up and throws up his hands before leaving with his girlfriend following him out. The exodus has begun. Slowly, people start leaving. If they're not, it's because they're high school students probably making out in the back row. My wife even gets up to leave, and the other couple with us join her. She's shocked that I said that I'm staying. I'm now so enraptured in this piece of crap movie that I have to see how these dumb writers try to wrap things up. In the end, I finished the whole thing while they go to get coffee. When the lights come up, I stand and begin applauding to the shock of the 10 people left in the theater. I feel like I've been trolled by Hollywood. I now own 10 copies of this movie on DVD and I gift them out to friends solely to have someone else to talk about how bad this movie is. You, sir, are a hero for your commitment to enjoying the garbage film that you paid for, and I'm sure every person in that theater remembered you for a long time afterwards. My only irritation is that you gave 10 DVDs worth of your money to it and might have contributed on a greater scale than most to Hollywood execs thinking that people wanted more of that kind of garbage in the future. What to expect when you're expecting. It wasn't what I expected. The third Twilight film. I was forced to go by my then-girlfriend. The cinema flooded about 40 minutes in, so we got evacuated. I was so happy. I walked out during Last House on the left. Turns out, a rough scene of the unspeakable act is not what you want to see when two 16-year-olds go on a date. My first movie date with my ex was Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I'd heard all this hype about the book, so I was excited to see it. Yeah, no one told me about that scene either. Wow, that was a first date movie for me too. I left in that part because I had no idea there was that kind of scene, and the guy that I was on a date with was already way creepier in person than his texts had let on. It was not a good vibe. Walked out on Batman: The Dark Knight. The movie started and it was way too loud. Eardrum-burstingly loud. I know I wasn't the only one, because anytime there was a sound above two people talking, the entire theater would flinch or cover their ears. I went to the manager to let him know, and he sighed and said he'd take care of it. A few minutes later, the movie was turned down so quiet that you couldn't hear anyone talking. Every person in the audience would turn their head or lean in when it was quiet. So I let the manager know again, to which he sighed and angrily stomped off. I realized he wasn't sighing because some high school kid didn't know what he was doing. He was angry at me for bothering him. Went back in and the movie was louder than before. I said F it and demanded my money back. At first he refused, and then about 50 people showed up behind me, all demanding the same thing. I saw the movie the same day in another theater and it was perfect. Good movie. Heath Ledger was amazing. I wanted desperately to walk out of The Last Airbender, but that would have meant waiting outside in the rain for an hour for my mum to come pick me up. After finishing the film, I wish I'd sat in the rain. Gamer. My mum took me as a surprise, thinking it was going to be a perfect movie for me. I was in the 6th grade. No point in walking out. Once or twice I've decided to take a nap though. I rarely find the time for a good nap. Batman and Robin. We walked out and saw Men in Black. It was much better. A movie called The Fog. Ooh, the fog kills people. Then stay out of the frickin' fog. It's the 2005 one. Not to be confused with The Mist. If you haven't seen that, it's really good. Don't read anything about it, just watch it, and then maybe report back after. Holy crap, everyone keeps talking about how good The Mist was, and I've been thinking, what? That movie was so bad. Nothing in the movie was good except for when the credits rolled. I think I've been thinking about The Fog the entire time. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. The opening night for The Dark Knight Rises. It wasn't the movie itself, which I loved, but there was this one Joker that messed it up for everyone. I'll never understand why people can't sit down, shut up, and let everyone else watch the movie they've paid for. Anyway, this guy must have seen the movie in advance and kept loudly dropping spoilers. I specifically went to the premiere because I wanted to see it before anyone else had a chance to ruin it for me by telling me what happened. So I cut my losses, left, and came back to watch it the next night. I thought this was going in a much darker direction. Same here, I was braced for it. After it messed it up for everyone, I was like, oh crap. In case anyone needs an update on tragic film events from 12 years ago, there was a premiere of The Dark Knight Rises where, unfortunately, someone decided to bring in several weapons and commit a massacre in one of the screenings. The narrator will also admit to getting nervous that the author was speaking about that event. Oof. My friend's dad took us to see South Park, bigger, longer, and uncut. He decided it was too vulgar for us about 20 minutes in, we were 12, and he decided to take us to Hooters instead. 9 out of 10 would do again. Super Babies, Baby Geniuses 2. I was with a friend who was desperate to see it for some frickin' reason. About 40 minutes into it, I reached my limit. I stood up and said, I'll be outside having a smoke, see you when it's over. Rude? Maybe, but I really couldn't handle one more second of that crap fest. Wife and I went to see Daredevil. Turns out we accidentally went into the wrong theater, which was showing How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. We were both looking at each other thinking, this is an awfully strange opening to Daredevil. Once we figured it out, we left and went to the right theater, but in retrospect, we should have just stayed where we were. Not me, but my mom walked out of the first Matrix. She and my aunt had no idea it was a sci-fi movie, and at the beginning of the scene in the car where they rip the thing out of Neo's chest, these two burst out laughing and left the theater. It's hard to remember through 16 years of knowing all about what The Matrix is, but it was because of marketing. They specifically made the previews just showing action, but no explanation. What is The Matrix was the catchphrase. If you're of the right frame of mind, this really worked for you. My friend said I had to see it back in '99 when we went. When Neo woke up in that pod, my fricking head exploded. It's like the Darth Vader and Skywalker thing. I had a rare afternoon off while on tour in Paris, and I decided to see a movie. I brought the ticket, brought some popcorn, sweets, a big drink, and other things. I walked into the theater, sat down, and then promptly got back up again and walked out. In a moment of blithering stupidity, I totally forgot I was in Paris and the movie was in French. I can't speak French. When the 6th Harry Potter movie came out, we had to pretty much drag my friend to see it. He's a military guy who hates fantasy movies. I was shocked he even agreed to go, albeit reluctantly. One of the first lines of the movie was, "Okay, Harry, wand at the ready," and he loudly scoffed. About 10 minutes into the movie, while Harry and Dumbledore were attempting to recruit Slughorn, a lone chair sat in the room of an empty house. I whispered to my friend, "He's the chair." His response was, "If he's the chair, I'm leaving." Sure enough, Dumbledore prodded the chair with his wand. Slughorn's head popped up, exclaiming, "Merlin's beard!" And my friend kept his word. I remember thinking that the movie was alright, and I saw it as an adult, but gosh darn if that description doesn't make it sound like the stupidest thing imaginable. I once took a girl on a first date to go and see The Aristocrats, the Paul Provenza documentary about the alleged dirtiest joke ever told. Personally, I love that stuff, but she was so thoroughly unimpressed that I felt embarrassed after the first 30 minutes and we left. She didn't laugh, smile, or say anything from the start of the film until I dropped her off at her place. We never spoke again. I actually got to meet Paul Provenza a few years later and told him the story. He thought it was pretty funny and gave me some great advice. He said roughly the equivalent to, "Don't sweat it. If a girl can't laugh at something like that, she's not the right one for you anyway." A few years after that, I watched it again with my then-girlfriend, and we both laughed non-stop through the whole thing. She's now my wife. In short, first date disaster watching The Aristocrats. Watched it again later in life with a new girlfriend and then married her. I had to walk out on Passion of the Christ when my sister threw up in the middle of the movie. There was a priest in the theater, and his reaction to it had me in more stitches than Jesus on my way to the car. It's so surreal watching that movie when it came out in theaters packed with uber-religious folks who were watching it as if it were a documentary. At one of the points where Jesus was getting beaten to a pulp, this weeping woman in the movie theater cried out, "You B-words." I had to stifle laughter because it made me think of South Park. I was the cause of a guy walking out of a movie once. His name was Mark, and the movie theater was the Marquee. So for the rest of middle and high school, anytime we wanted to leave early, we'd ask to pull a Marquee Mark. Thought I was on a date with a girl, and she ended up inviting Mark because they'd been talking as well. I ended up going for the handhold during the movie. Middle school, I know. He saw this, called his mother, and got up saying he was going to the bathroom and never came back. Best part of this was my other friend who drove us had to sit through it to drive me home, and Marky Mark is some guy none of us know and had to deal with the whole situation and awkward rejection. She broke up with me 2 days later because I exited the window she was browsing during computer class as a joke. How is that a joke? I don't know either, so don't bother asking. She seemed like the rational type anyway. This was the most middle school story that has ever middle schooled. I'll admit that up until my first reread, I didn't catch your part about middle school, and my imagination was afire thinking that this was just the most hilariously childish workplace or college class in the world. Oh well, hopefully we will get a story of that nature sometime in the future. Dad and I went to see War of the Worlds. I thought it was really dull, so I looked over to see if Dad thought the same so we could leave. And he looked properly into the film, so I didn't say anything and watched the rest of it. Afterwards, Dad said that he was glad that I enjoyed the film as he hadn't and wanted to leave. He had done the same thing that I'd done and thought I was enjoying it. I never walked out even if the movie was crap. $10 and more for a ticket I'll fricking endure. I do know about the sunk cost fallacy. I guess I just never experienced a movie so bad that I wanted to leave the theater. You're all talking about wasting time, but if you go to the movies in the first place, you probably had some time to waste anyway. If you absolutely hate it, then fine, go get a refund. Marley and Me. The only movie I've ever walked out on, and it was because I was sobbing like a B-word towards the end with 15 to 20 minutes left to go, and I couldn't stand to watch another minute of that emotional torture. The fourth Indiana Jones film. I walked out and went into Speed Racer and walked out of that too. It was a bad day at the cinema. I didn't walk out. I would intentionally go to see terrible movies. Why? I won 52 free tickets one year, and when my girlfriend at the time would do her photography classes, I'd go and see a bad movie in an empty theater and kill 2 hours by sleeping in the cinema if there was nothing good out that I hadn't seen already. The weekend staff got to know me and would tell me which movie had the least tickets sold so I wouldn't be disturbed. The Box, starring Cameron Diaz and James Marsden. It was aggressively nonsensical. I saw that movie with a friend and her whacked-out group for my friend's birthday. They were the typical teenagers making noise with their phones all out. No one in the half-full theater complained. Some people joined us and a couple of people walked out. Yep. 2 weeks' notice. I was a teenager with my first serious girlfriend. The movie was an excuse to get together. We bought tickets to show the stub if asked by parents. We walked in and stood up and left 10 minutes later to go make out in the car. No idea if the movie was any good, but I got to see a naked girl in person for the first time that night, so I rate it as one of the best movies of all time. This is hands down the best reason to walk out of a movie theater. Wild Hogs. I don't feel that an explanation is warranted. That Frankenstein movie with Sting in it. Walked out and I saw Weird Science instead. Yeah, I'm old. Napoleon Dynamite. I saw it with my family over Thanksgiving holiday and walked out about halfway through thinking we wasted our money. Woke up the next day and couldn't stop quoting it, so we went and saw it again. Now it's one of my favorites. My dad walked out of the cinema during Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone because it was, in his words, complete bollocks. I almost walked out of The Lady in the Water, but it was just so bad that we couldn't leave. I walked out once. It was during the Ender's Game movie. I'm able to separate my movie experience from when I read a book, but this movie was so horrible. It was appalling that it went by the same name. It doesn't help that Ender's Game and its ensuing series were some of my favorite books. I couldn't stand to watch another minute of it. I understand the merits the movie has. I also try to separate the movie and the book as much as possible when I watch them. However, I read Ender's Game and Speaker for the Dead 3 days after my grandfather, who loved them, died. Those books were an escape for me. In another low point of my life, I read the Bean sub-series, and that series is the only one to make me cry. I am unabashedly attached to these books, and I couldn't stand the movie. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.